everyone, my name is Elizabeth, and today we'll be talking about timeout. People often think of timeout as like sending their child into this dark corner for 3 hours to think about what they've done. And that is why timeout is so often deemed ineffective or a waste of time. But I'm here today to show you how to make it worthwhile and how to make it work for you. So first of all, what is timeout? Timeout is a strategy parents can use to discourage their child from doing dangerous or violent things by withholding access to rewards for a period of time. So this means that if a child is doing something that maybe they shouldn't be doing, they lose access to rewards such as attention from you or others in the household, activities or games going on, or even items such as an iPad. The purpose of timeout is to immediately get rid of the undesirable behavior. So what we want to do is remove the child from the environment where the behavior occurred and place them into timeout. It's important to only use timeout for serious behaviors and to let your child know what those behaviors are that can land them in timeout in advance. So how does timeout work? So first, we must select a location where timeouts can take place. This is typically a place that's not very interesting, like a corner of a room with a chair. A child's bedroom is typically not the best place for timeouts just because there's a lot of distractions, a lot of things going on. We want to keep it to a place that's kind of boring. Second, choose how long the timeout will last. This is typically from like 1 to 10 minutes, depending on the behavior that occurred, but research has shown that longer than 10 minutes is not more effective. So a longer timeout does not necessarily mean you will have better outcomes. So it's important to stick within that time frame. Third, when the tension has decreased or when the timeout is over, it is very important to communicate with the child. You want to take maybe 1 or 2 minutes after the timeout to sit down with them and explain to them why their behavior was not appropriate. Okay, here's a really great idea. Something that you can do is practice how to go into timeout with your child in order to make expectations clear. So maybe on a day where there's not too much going on in the household, you can walk them over to their designated timeout area and let them know what you expect them to do while they're sitting in timeout. So you can say something like, I expect you to sit there quietly, not engage or distract others. And this is also a really great time to explain to them what those behaviors are that can land them in timeout. If a child refuses to go into timeout, here's what to do and what not to do. So first and foremost, the first thing you always want to do is simply ask the child to go into timeout. But sometimes they do refuse, so that is why we have our backup plan. So beforehand, we want to choose a privilege that can be removed immediately. This can be something like an item such as an iPad, a point from a reward system, screen time, video game time, anything of that sort. So for example, if Fernando hits his sister and his mom asks him to go into timeout and he refuses, she can say something like, okay, I have to remove 20 minutes from screen time from your iPad for refusing to go into timeout. And that's it. What we don't want to do is argue. We don't want to argue because expectations should have been set by this point. And you also don't want to force a child into timeout just because that's what the backup plan is for. And lastly, you don't want to lock a child in a room with timeout or punishment because this can be dangerous and it can also cause things to escalate, which we don't want. When timeout is over, we want to praise the first good thing that the child does. You can praise them for things such as returning to a calm tone of voice, for getting along with their siblings, for following instructions when you ask them to do something. We want to praise the first good thing they do because we want to let them know that we not only punish inappropriate behavior, but we also acknowledge and praise their appropriate behaviors. We want to let them know that we're not only focused on the negative, but also the positive. A child is not free of their tasks because they've been sent to timeout. They can do them when their timeout is over. So for example, again, if Fernando's mom asks him and his sister to pick up their toys, and while they're doing that, he hits his sister and is sent to timeout, he still has to pick up the toys after their timeout. He is not relieved of his responsibilities. They are simply delayed. Okay, so here is an example of how timeout can play out. So here we have Frank and Lily, who are siblings. And here we can see that they're playing with their toys together when suddenly Frank pushes Lily. So this is where a parent or a guardian should intervene. So we would tell Frank, we could say something like, Frank, please go to timeout for 5 minutes for pushing your sister. And then we'd walk them over. And here is Frank in the corner with a chair. and after the 5 minutes. So after his 5 minutes are over, of course, we want to remember those 1 or 2 minutes to explain to him why his behavior was not appropriate. And after that, we want to remember to praise the first good thing after the timeout is over. So here we have Frank and Lily again sharing their toys, getting along. So I could say something like, Frank, thank you for sharing your toys and getting along with your sister. I really appreciate it. And maybe, give him a big smile, a thumbs up, something of that sort. Okay. So timeout does not teach appropriate behavior. So using timeout without teaching a child what they should be doing is not very helpful. If you'd like to learn ways to teach and encourage positive behaviors, check out our other videos. You can begin with the video on praise for ideas on where to start. Okay, so here we have a really quick pop quiz. We have a true or false question. So true or false, an effective timeout is short, 10 minutes or less. Remember our time frame that we talked about, and I'll give you a minute. So we know that the answer is true. So timeouts should be short. 1 to 10 minutes will absolutely do the job. Longer than 10 minutes, as we know, is not more effective. So it's important to stick between the 1 to 10 minute frame. Okay, here's our last question. True or false? Timeout teaches appropriate behavior. Think back to a few slides and I'll give you a few seconds. We know that this is false. So timeout alone does not teach appropriate behavior. Along with timeout, we should be teaching children the desirable behaviors. We should be teaching them what they should be doing. If you want to learn a little bit more about timeout, you can follow the resource on our screen. And also remember to check out our other up and coming videos. Thank you for watching.